guys, welcome back to Clockwork. Noodles here for another breakdown. This week we are breaking down Requiem of the Rose King, episode 9. Before we get going, make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. Very shortly, I'm going to start working on my end of season review. This is where I'm going to round up my experiences of this season, give you my top 3 anime, lingering opinions on the season as a whole, but it'll be a chance for me to talk about the season as a whole and start looking to the future. We have a new season coming our way, a lot of good anime. I'm going to break down what I'm watching, what I plan to watch, what I'm going to break down on the channel, and I will give you guys a little run through of all the things coming your way so you can also decide what things you're interested in. There is a Discord channel too that will allow you to get a notification to your phone whenever videos go up. Next week, there is going to be a bit of shuffling. It's my birthday. The video for Requiem of the Rose King episode 10 will still go out. It may just be a little bit later. It's the other 2 videos that are having to switch place. The next video to go out on the channel will be episode 10 of Requiem. Let's get going. Episode 9. A lot of interesting things happened this week. Definitely setting up for tragedy. I'm also aware next week's title could also be the week. It could be the week that tragedy literally strikes. Richard's dream is gonna come crashing down. It's just a matter of when. Richard still doesn't realise who Henry is. Henry is just a random shepherd, a shepherd they found in the forest, ironically cropping up whenever they really need to see them. Catesby knows exactly who Henry is. He is prevented from telling any important information. Worryingly, Richard's words when they say, "Oh, he's my friend, they've been my friend for a while." If Catesby wasn't the person that Catesby is a good character, we like Catesby. Richard's words could paint them as a bit of a traitor because Richard unknowingly is saying, Henry, the guy who is responsible for my father's death, is my friend. I've been a friend for a long time. However, Catesby soon works out that Richard doesn't know who the hell they're talking to, who they're talking about, who they've been spending all that time with. During the scene where Richard promises in a year's time to re-meet up with Henry, the entire sequence is tilted, foreshadows things are not going to work out as we want them to work out. I don't think the two are going to meet up again in a year. I think something is going to happen now which will prevent it from happening, whether it's finally Richard will work out who Henry is or Henry is going to die. There's a lot of people now chasing after Henry. We do see him escaping by the skin of his teeth at the end of the episode. We do see Catesby asking the question, who was he, to Richard. This is simply so he can ascertain the fact that Richard does not know who he is talking to. Catesby knows who Henry is. I believe they've actually met. For some reason, Richard doesn't know who Henry is, despite me really thinking he should know who he is. There was also the thing where Henry doesn't know who Edward is, despite the fact that they definitely met. I think in episode 1 or 2, they knew who Edward was at that point. A few of the plot lines in this anime are allowed to continue simply because characters are none aware of who they're talking to, despite the fact they probably would know who they're talking to. Richard admits to Catesby that they love the man that they were just hanging out with. They love that shepherd, but they know that it's a love that cannot be. Richard admits that the love can't happen. Even if you knew it was wrong, would you be able to go back? Sadly, I don't think Richard's love will ever be. Something happens this week as well, which is completely out of canon, which makes me believe that this storyline is not going to follow the storyline of what really happened at all. The end of the War of the Roses comes when the 2 houses become one via marriage, Richard with Anne, historically correct, but this doesn't look like it's going in that direction. Something could still happen, but I don't believe it's going to end with Richard with Anne. It could do something completely surprising and put Henry with Richard, and that would still be a white and red rose coming together. Events of this week, I am no longer sure of how the story is going to end. Warwick in the mask was perhaps the scariest jump scare moment of this episode for me, because we all start talking about ghosts and then suddenly there he is with no eyes. Very, very creepy. This week we have Christmas on the border approaching and we have a masked banquet for our current proxy king, Warwick. We do get to see jesters and actors performing in the court of the king, all things that would have happened during this period of time. The scene is colour popped. The only colours really showing up are that of George and Warwick, our 2 main players of the sequence. Sad, depressed George decides to get drunk. It's Christmas, fine, get drunk. We've been talking about ghosts. There's a lot of talk about the past. The topic of the play that we're seeing in the court is of a father seeking out a son, or a son seeking out a father. George ends up recalling his father and his own childhood, the fact that he pledged loyalty, all the happy days. Essentially, George is taken back to a happier moment. Right now, George is nobody. Warwick doesn't need him. labelled a traitor of his own side, all for nothing. It's not actually resulting in him being king or anything. The relationship with George and Warwick by this point is completely ruined anyway. George doesn't really seem to like Warwick anymore. Even before the ghost plot takes place, the relationship between these two was on the rocks at best. George was going to simply look for a way out. I am a little bit suspicious, and I'll mention it a bit further down the line, of George, but I also think I might be jumping the gun a little bit. The plan of the ghost plot to essentially make George believe that he's been haunted by the father's ghost to do the right thing. This is what you should be doing. You should be on this side. If anything, guilt trip him to go back to where he belongs. During this period of time, England was a very suspicious place. You will see a lot of ghosts within the works of Shakespeare. People believed in witches, people believed in magic. It's a very dark time. It's a very different time from what we are in now. Mainly, most people nowadays, the idea of ghosts isn't so widely believed. It might be something you mention at a dinner table, or you'll see a creepy place and you get a bad vibe. The next stage of war begins as Edward declares war upon Edward. Very confusing. 2 Edwards right now. It is simply the war of the Edwards. We do check in again with Henry, who has now been recollected, taken back to seemingly London. The one thing I am very confused about with most of this is where it's taking place. When we infiltrate the tower or the castle that Henry apparently is being held at in London, but I also thought that Warwick was in France. There's a lot of to and froing going on. A lot of people are moving about without it being clear that they're moving. Henry admits that they do not want war. Henry is not condoning war. The one pushing for war right now is Edward and Warwick. Henry has had enough. He's had enough of war. He doesn't want any more war. George swears loyalty to Henry. This is all just a ruse, as we see later on, which is where we see the snowdrop. The snowdrop is a very innocent flower. It is white, perhaps showing us this is how Henry views the people going to war, praises George, the people getting lost at war. He relates to being a shepherd, wanting to guide his sheep, listen to the people. Henry is trying to be a benevolent king. Cersei, aka Margaret, this week, condemning her son to being even less than the father that you hate. She completely hits a nerve, and she knows that her son hates his father. You have to consummate your marriage in front of your own mother. Unsurprising to any Game of Thrones fan. If anything, this plotline right now is quite mild to what happens in Game of Thrones. The act finally does occur with Edward promising that they're not going to kill Richard. Edward wouldn't have killed Richard anyway because Edward is in love with Richard. Edward would love to nothing more than have Richard as a pawn or toy when Edward becomes king. That is his ultimate goal. Anne and Edward seemingly do the act. This is where we now depart from canon, which is what makes me wonder if the ending of this anime is going to be something completely removed from real life, what actually happens. Because in real life, Richard dies on a battlefield. Richard gets a burial unmarked, and they did not like Richard. He was buried in a car park. He was found underneath a car park. There has been some cool recent data where they actually pieced together the skull of Richard III. You can actually see how Richard looked. He does look how I imagine him. There's been some recent looking into the lines as well, and Richard's lineage may not be what we first thought it would be, which would then put some of the royal family not where they should be. A lot of interesting things. There's a lot of mystery surrounding the lineage and the inheritance of the throne and how it's to and froing and everything. But this week we are now back at war. We have Edward versus Edward. Richard's brother Edward is now the one at a slight disadvantage right now. We come face to face with George on the battlefield, wondering, is George going to betray Warwick? Is he going to come home? Yes, of course he is. George by this point was out of favour with Warwick. Everything had kind of gone wrong. He was guilty. He was upset. He had realised that he wasn't going to get what it was he wanted to get. By this point, he ends up returning to the side. The brothers end up reuniting. I am slightly suspicious of George because Warwick did state that I've sent my best man. I don't know who Warwick has sent. It could be George and we could have a complete twist, but there's nothing to gain. I don't believe George has anything to gain from Warwick. I also don't think Warwick's words really hold a great deal of weight anymore in George's mind. We will ignore the fact that George could be suspicious and we will celebrate the reunion of the three. But we're now hot on the trail of Henry. We are getting so close to having a face-to-face between Richard and Henry. Catesby was completely aware as the name Henry was mentioned. He was looking dead centre at Richard, knowing that it's possible that Richard's world would be turned upside down into a tempest. Catesby is aware that Richard is in love, has feelings for the enemy. Richard, unaware of all of this, So when the truth finally comes out, Richard may not even be able to thrust the weapon as they're planning to do so. They might hesitate. They might end up having a mental breakdown right in front of Henry, unable to kill Henry. The death of Henry is going to end up plaguing Richard so much that eventually it may even lead to their death. Before Catesby can really say anything this week, Catesby ends up getting summoned back to Hastings. Catesby is out of the picture for now, which is quite sad. I like Catesby. I want him back. We see the white boar that Richard saved on a hunting trip saving Henry. I think Henry saw the boar in the forest at the same time. And the boar seemingly is the reason why Henry ends up leaving, saving Henry's life. Henry is completely gone when Richard does come into the room, all ready to attack and kill Henry, thinking that this was it. This could be the end of everything. It's going to be interesting to see what would have happened if Henry had died there and then. Would Richard be able to move on? Would Richard have anything to really live for if Henry, the person that fuels their existence, that revenge on Henry fueling Richard, what would you live for once that revenge is over? I was slightly confused to where we were because right now when we break into the room and Henry is gone, that is London. That is the Tower of London. I'm also a bit confused why Warwick would allow Henry to be at the Tower. It's risky. Why have you not got the king with you? Because if Henry dies, it would automatically go to Edward, not Warwick. It's a little bit confusing. The return of Elizabeth this week, and she has a present. We have the next king, the prince, the heir to the throne of England right here. We have a boy. That now means that neither George or Richard are in line for the throne. If Richard is now to die, as he might get stabbed by Elizabeth because she did say she wants him dead once she's got her trump card, everything is now going to go to that child. We have a confrontation with Richard and Buckingham this week. Richard admitting, I don't want the throne. And Buckingham finally gives up seemingly on Richard, working out that Richard is not the same person. Richard no longer lusts and hasn't got that same look in their eye anymore. All Richard wants is just to kill Henry. They're content with that. If Henry dies, that's it. They can happily live somewhere as a duke or something. At the end, Warwick, seemingly very upset, not quite aware of what's happened with George just yet, declares war upon Edward. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of lines starting to cross. Next week is worrying because it says my name is Richard Plantagenet. That could be this is just who I am. I am realising who I am. I am proud of who I am. Or it could be I'm coming face to face with Henry. This is who I am. I'm a bit worried that everything that are up next week. Bearing in mind as well, this anime does continue into next season. There are 24 episodes. We're not going to have a break. Where most other animes are starting to wrap up for the end of the seasons, this anime isn't. We might end on a cliffhanger, have a week's break and then continue. But I have a feeling that it's all going to come out in the open. If Henry finds out who Richard is, means there's going to be a face-off, and I don't think Richard can kill Henry, despite the fact that they really hate them. There's also now this ache in their heart. It's going to be a conflict of interests in Richard's heart. Henry won't kill Richard. That's not going to happen. Henry is probably happy to die by Richard's hands. So it's going to be a very interesting week next week. We've got a lot of things going on. Now that we've got an heir to the throne and Elizabeth is back, Elizabeth might try and off her husband because that did seem to be the goal anyway. I still think that Elizabeth is hiding a big secret of who they are. We will find out. The plot is starting to thicken. There's going to be a lot of broken hearts by the end of it. It's going to end in tragedy. This is truly a Shakespearean work. All going to end in tears and bloodshed. I hope you guys have had a good weekend. Make sure you're looking after yourselves. I will see you in a week's time now because I am off for my birthday. I hope you guys have a good time during that period of time, and I will catch up with you next week as we find out what is going on. Have a good day, guys. Bye-bye.